computer. Okay, sharing screen. Here we go.
We're ready. Okay, we're ready to roll, finally. Great. So I'm really excited for this seminar today. Dr. Schultze over here is an associate professor in geography. He's also our GIS coordinator. And he had the good fortune to travel to the Galápagos Islands twice, right? And the young ladies over here joined him on that trip. So that was really exciting for them. So they're going to report on what they saw and what they learned and what they found. Dr. Schultze works on microclimate. So I think some of the research was actually on that topic. And these two young ladies did a directed studies award or directed studies with Dr. Schultze, who just recently won an award for leading directed studies in our department. So sorry for reading from my phone, but Jade is currently working as an environmental scientist at Covington, great, civil and environmental. She graduated from our program in May in geography, and she minored in GIS and biology. So nice mix of different disciplines there. She's planning to go to graduate school next year in environmental sciences. Abby Kratsch is a junior in geography, and she's minoring also in GIS as well as meteorology. Good for you. And she just started an internship at the Mobile Baykeeper and hopes to go on to graduate school in 2 years after she graduates. So without any further ado.
Thank you all for joining us here. First, let me just start off by saying that this opportunity to travel and explore one of the most important and biodiverse places in the world is an absolute privilege and pleasure. I cannot thank Dr. Schultze enough for all the opportunities he has given me, and he has supported me throughout my academic journey every step of the way, and I will forever be grateful for that. So first, I want to talk a little bit about a hiking trip that me and Schultze took back in March this year. Looking at, when you first look at this, you may not immediately know what you're looking at. This right here is actually a caldera. And I can't emphasize this enough. These pictures really don't do it justice. It was enormous. I mean, it was at least this big in person. Calderas are actually pretty interesting. They are a large depression that was created after a volcano erupts and collapses. So it's amazing to actually be on these islands where you can witness a part of that history and kind of see the evolution of the island geography. A little known fact about me is that I love plants. This is another reason why this is one of my favorite spots that we visited. Out of the approximately 500 pictures that I took at this one place, I had to narrow it down to 3. But I think that these 3 photos effectively capture the amount of diverse vegetation at Los Gemelos. There was actually a trail that wrapped around the caldera, and that's what you see here in the first and third picture. And to me, it felt like I had been transported to a different world, or maybe even a prehistoric Earth where giant fauna ruled the earth. And it's seeing places like this and getting out and experiencing different things that inspire me to keep learning and to keep wanting to try new things. And this happens.
So if you go to the islands, it is pretty common to see sea turtles, and it is probably the most incredible thing you're ever going to see. I'm going to show this clip real quick. So our snorkeling guide took this video of the sea turtles that we saw, and there is no words to describe how absolutely majestic and beautiful these creatures really are, and how important they are as well. So we were out on a boat to take us out to Kick a Rock, which is where all of this is located, right off of San Cristobal Island. We were on the boat. It was kind of a gray, muggy day. It was cloudy. The water was a stark gray color. There's not much color, you know. Well, you waddle off to the edge of the boat in your snorkel gear, and then you jump in, and then that's everything is alive. Everything, everywhere you're looking, there's something moving. There's colors you've never seen before. You honestly forget that you're a human being for a second, which is how incredible this sight is. And then out of the depths of the water, you look down because it's like 300 feet below you. You just see these huge, like almost like hovercrafts, just coming up, rising up to get air. And it's these beautiful sea turtles, and they're below you, they're above you, swimming with you, they're beside you. And all you can think about is how amazing it is to be there and to experience that and to be a human being for just a second and live through this. It's absolutely amazing.
So for me, an enduring thing, anytime you've been to the islands, I know that we're lucky enough in, I believe in the biology program that they send a group over there. I know Dr. Mata, I thought I saw him a little bit earlier in here. But anyway, they would agree with this. If you go to San Cristobal Island, one of the things that you immediately notice is that, yeah, it's an island. They have about 15, 20 or so thousand permanent residents on the island. But really, the people who run the show are the sea lions. Sea lions run the show. You're not allowed to go to them, but they can come to you. And especially down by the marina, down by the docks, or if you're swimming in the water, they will just come right up to you. They have no reason to fear you. They don't, they're not afraid at all. They will come to you. They're curious. You'll see people on beaches sitting on towels, and a sea lion will just come right up to them and then burp right in their face. It smells like fish and poop, kind of, is the best way to describe it. It's a scientific term right there. But that's basically it, is that the sea lions run the island. When you're walking down a street in Rio, here, downtown Mobile or in any other city, you're walking one way, you got people walking the other way. You give people their space when you're walking on a crowded sidewalk. Thing is when you're in the Galápagos, you have to walk around sea lions because they're walking the other direction. They're just part of the furniture of the island. They're just there. They sit on benches. They will just, there are swing sets and playgrounds that they'll take over. And if you're lucky enough, one comes up to you, it might even touch you. That's called a boop. You can get a land boop. I got land booped. It also wanted a little bit of my beer the last night that I was sitting there. I'm not gonna share that video. But or you're lucky enough to get a water boop, which is where you're swimming and they just boop, they just kind of tap you out. I was lucky enough to get a water boop. Jay nearly got a water boop, but we'll get her one next time. But the thing is, you only get booped when you're not expecting to get a boop. But that's the key when it comes to these sea lions, is they really are everywhere. They are just they're just part of the island, and it's something that you just never forget. It's that they're also called water puppies. They're just kind of everywhere, as young as a couple months old, what we saw, all the way up to a couple decades old. And just seeing them kind of, if you do believe in reincarnation, you should want to be reincarnated as a sea lion on San Cristobal Island, because life is probably about as good as it could possibly be. And with that in mind, we introduced the Galápagos Islands. So the Galápagos Islands are located pretty much due south of Mobile. We're at 88 west latitude. They're at 90 west latitude. So basically, go to New Orleans and go due south, and just keep going south. You'll eventually hit the islands. But they're at the equator. The equator transects Isabella Island, the largest island. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But yeah, it's basically right at the equator, due south of where we are. It is a interesting historical parable, because it's kind of this idea of untouched, pristine tropical islands, and then we're going to throw humans into the equation. Anthropologists, historians disagree a little bit on whether the locals, either the Incas or the Quechua people, were on the islands before we had colonization that began more or less, let's call it, like really in the 1800s, but really as far back as the 1500s with Spanish and British explorers going around the islands. But what happens when you take these pristine islands and then just toss humans in and then see what happens? That's not just here. It's happened on many, many, many other islands across the world. But it is also, of course, of biological importance, but biologically also a parable in terms of, well, what happens when we throw those humans in? What happens to the ecosystems? It's not just the island landscapes. It's also what lives there. We'll get into the biological importance shortly. But basically, yeah, what happens when we throw humans into the equation? is it good? Is it bad? Well, seeing what's going on at the Galapagos is really representative of what has either already happened or is currently happening or will happen in many other parts of the world. And on top of that, the Galapagos are what we call a canary in the coal mine regarding things like climate change. What we see going on there now, they've swung back and forth between El Nino and La Ninas. Now, that's not necessarily what climate change is. El Ninos and La Ninas, those are global teleconnection weather phenomena and climate phenomena. But seeing the Galapagos rocket back and forth between hot, dry conditions and cool, wet conditions, and how the ecosystems and the people that live there respond to these massive changes. Right now, we're in they're getting cooked right now by a really strong El Nino positive sequence right now. Seeing how that works, we've been watching this now for decades, even centuries. But that is then representative of what many other tropical islands either have, are, or will go through regarding climate change, excuse me, in the next couple of decades. So the Galapagos aren't just simply this amazing place to go swim with sea turtles, get booped by a sea lion, and then go to some collapsed, lava chamber that then created this giant caldera and then a rainforest grew on top of it. Yeah, that's awesome. But it's also extremely important for the rest of the world. It is representative of so many other places. So as you see on the, this is satellite imagery. It's very rare to get clear day satellite imagery of the islands, but what you can see is that there's some very sparkling emerald greens. Those are the rainforest green spaces, but right next to them, extremely dry conditions, either thanks to the fact that they're they're volcanic landscapes or they're desert landscapes. Just straight up, we'll get into that a little bit later. You have literally deserts right next to rainforest. There's nowhere else on Earth that you can say that that's the case. So they are, from a geographic standpoint, an absolutely fascinating place to see because you can see almost the entire world in just these couple of islands. So let's talk a little bit about where are they?
So when I told my family that I was going to go to the Galapagos Island, I got the question, where is that? Quite often. So the Galapagos Islands are located west of off the coast of South America, about 600 miles west of Ecuador. It is within the Humboldt Current, which is a cold current, and there has been very recent geological activities such as active volcanoes and earthquakes. Sorry.
So we all know the infamous story of how Darwin originally went to these islands and kind of developed his theory of natural selection and thus furthering the theory of evolution. So when we talk about the biological importance of these islands, it's not to be understated because the species found here are found nowhere else on Earth. Species such as the Galapagos giant tortoise, the marine iguana, the Galapagos penguins, the blue-footed boobies, etc. And it's because of the geography of these islands that these species were able to, basically these endemic species, because of the geography of the islands, can become subspecies. And then, so these islands really they're living examples of these evolutionary principles. So they're basically a great example of how scientists can study these evolutionary processes on the island in real time and studying these interactions between even native and invasive species. When me and Dr. Schultze were there back in March, I know we saw some invasive plants, so the raspberry plant that's native here, common here, but it's invasive there. So it's a conglomerate of such great biological importance because of the species there, the plants there, and also now we're seeing the effects of human activity on these ecosystems. So not only is it important to study here, but this also acts as a place to study so we can see what happens in other places.
So the islands are facing some modern issues. One being that the islands need to be self-sustainable through agriculture. However, the agriculture needs to be environmentally friendly. So it's like a problem inside of a problem there. They need to keep up with the ecotourism, protecting the environment and the biodiversity. However, they can't just push out the locals that live there. And the final issue, and probably one of the biggest ones, is there needs to be more water on Santa Cruz for development.
I'm going to talk a little bit about our experiment and what we use. So the main part of this experiment does rely on these microclimate sensors. We started basically a kind of mini version of this research back around this time last fall. And we put these sensors around campus to make sure that they were working properly and that this is something that we could use to implement the research on the Galapagos Islands. They're actually pretty easy and effective to use. So this part right here is the actual center, and this honeycomb casing kind of protects it from the weather. So these sensors record temperature, humidity, and dew point every minute of every day. They work via Bluetooth. So when I was out in the field collecting data, I had an app on my phone that basically I connect to it via Bluetooth. I can download the data into a CSV or an Excel file. So gathering data is really effective, and that's really important for when you're doing kind of this fast-paced research out in the field. We deployed these sensors back on March 6, 2023, and before we put them out, we did test them in a cryo chamber to make sure that they were calibrated correctly. So no wrong data here.
So the sensors were located that we put on, they are on San Cristobal Island. So we have 10 sensors along the road from Puerto Bacarrizo, Moreno, and to Puerto Chino, which is along the entire island. They are placed in situ, which means that they are located in like bushes and trees and other natural places to get the best data. They will record for at least one full year from March 6, 2023 to March 31st, 2024. They record every minute of every day. So it's a lot of data.
One of my favorite experiences was actually implementing these sensors on the island. And it was one of my favorite experiences because I was out there doing science, and the fast pace of it all was really fun and exciting. You know, it's a great feeling to actually be out in the field after months of planning and coordinating and not knowing if things are going to go correctly. And in every step of the way, this was a fantastic learning experience. For example, I learned that you can in fact get through TSA with 10 of these suspicious looking honeycomb cases with sensors on them, but you cannot get through TSA with a pair of pliers. We found that out the hard way. But seriously, the way that we did it, you know, we had general ideas of like where we wanted to place them based off of factors such as elevation, land cover, distance. And when we got there, the only mode of transportation available to us was through taxi. So a very patient man, Feliciano, our taxi driver, basically took us to the other side of the island and back in one day with frequent stops of saying, wait, this looks like a great spot. Stop in the middle of the road. And can we go back a little bit? I think that tree would be a really solid spot, and he'd have to back up in the middle of the road. So we love him. Installing these sensors was one of my favorite experiences of this trip because I felt like I was, quote unquote, doing the damn thing. I mean, I was actually out there in the field doing science, and to me, that is one of the most best feelings in the world, and I loved every minute of it.
So a little bit science-wise here, talking about why we're doing this. Well, there's this idea called within both climatology and meteorology called lapse rates. Basically, the idea if you go up in the troposphere, you go up in the lower part of the atmosphere that we live within, things generally are going to get colder. And usually by a pretty easy-going rate, we can do some light math, some light algebra. We're not going to do that here. But what that means is basically things get cold. If you're in an airplane at 40,000 feet versus at the ground, it could be 90 degrees at the ground, but it could be negative 20 up at, you know, cruising altitude for an airplane. Well, it works like that pretty much everywhere on Earth. So elevation goes up, temperatures go down. Now, in tropical locations, generally speaking, because it's going to be wet there pretty much everywhere near the equator, cooler temperatures just generally mean you're going to have higher humidities. So the tropics generally are going to be hot and they're going to be humid, unless you got some weird conditions going on thanks to mountain ranges or a few other things. If it's cooler, it's more humid, generally speaking. But what this means is that environments can change. There's a very classic example within the field of climatology of Mount Kilimanjaro. Mount Kilimanjaro is the tallest mountain in Africa. It's on the border of Kenya and Tanzania. It's about 18 or so thousand feet to the top. Now, at the top, there is a glacier. Now, that's impressive because Mount Kilimanjaro is basically at 2 degrees south latitude. So it is as, equatorial of a climate as could possibly be. Down at the bottom, down at more or less what is sea level, at least the base of the mountain, which you go up 18,000 feet, you have a glacier up there. It's not gonna be there much longer. You should go see it while you can. But anyway, thing is that on the way up, as things get colder, you see the environments change considerably. The plants, the animals that live there, as you get higher elevations, change, and they change significantly. And even though, like, if you look at this mountain, I mean, down at the bottom, it's like the Lion King down there, but like as you get up to higher elevations, it's going to get colder. You get into new ecosystems. So with that in mind, we wanted to look at that on these tropical islands, not as tall as Mount Kilimanjaro, the Galápagos, particularly San Cristobal Island, but we did want to see how these environments change. We wanted to be looking at lapse rates, but we wanted to look at one other thing, because this is something that had been sort of not theorized, because that's not the right word, but at least we hadn't seen too much experimental evidence of how microclimates play in here. So microclimates, just here's the very, very short version of it. Temperatures vary a lot more over space than you might think. You may have experienced this when you're standing out in the summer heat directly in the sun, then you walk in the shade. Okay, temperatures are different. All right, that's pretty obvious. But how much temperatures really do change over space can really surprise you. So, we had talked a little bit about, the previous study that we'd done putting out sensors across campus. You guys were part of the experiment if you were here last fall, and if you didn't know it, we put 20 micro sensors around campus. We stuck them on like street signs. We put them on the Glen Sebastian Nature Trail. We put them just outside this building, and we were measuring temperatures. And what did we find? We basically found that at the same moment on sunny days, we could have on our campus alone as much as a 25-degree temperature difference at exactly the same minute. That blue line on here, by the way, is the Mesonet station that Dr. Kimball runs here, the USA Mesonet. On this particular day, September 24th, 2022, the temperature, if you checked your phone, we consider that to be a mesoscale climate. So you look at your phone app, it would have never said that it got warmer than 90 degrees on campus. And yet we showed at exactly the same time temperatures as high as nearly 110 Fahrenheit and as cool as nearly 80 degrees Fahrenheit at the same minute, depending on what was going on, showing just how varied these microclimates can be, even though, again, check your phone, oh, it's 90 degrees. That's all you see. No, it can be as hot as 110, as cool as 80. Microclimates are a function of land cover. So just like, what are you on? Yeah, it makes sense. Oh yeah, it's a parking lot. Of course it's going to be hot. You ever walk on asphalt on a hot summer day? Sure, that's not fun. And then you go into a forested area where it's much shadier. Yeah, it's going to be cooler. But there are other ways to look at this in terms of land cover. We can have, like in a tropical island, we have different, basically just what do we have? Agriculture, we can have rainforest, we can have grassland, we can have beaches. All of these different things can help create a microclimate. Toss in aspect, the direction you're facing. Are you on the east facing side of the island, the west face, north face, south face? That matters, especially for time of day. And then also with canopy cover, just what is above your head in terms of shading. There's a couple other things that can fit in there as well. So microclimates are well known to harbor extreme temperature differences not picked up by mesoscale processes. What does that mean? That's kind of back to that idea with your phone. Your phone may only be reading from a mesoscale weather station at the airport or here on campus. You might be picking up 90 degrees, but literally you walk outside the Earth and Life Sciences building, it could be 105, it could be 87. It could be very, very, very different. We especially missed, there are several papers, especially in the last 15 years, on how extreme highs are being missed in urban spaces, but we didn't look all that much in remote ecological areas. And that's where we come in. Urban microclimates are being studied quite a bit. I have a paper right now that I'm working with the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society right now, kind of batting back and forth with them. That's in urban spaces, but this one being in remote ecological areas, almost nobody's done this before. And that's where the unique science comes in here. So the Galapagos, this is a topographic map here, but then with topography, we can then change what the landscapes are. Remember, you go up, it gets cooler. If it gets cooler as you go up, you change the environment. If you're down at the bottom, if you're in the coastal zone, there's literally cactus at the beach. So watch out if you're wearing sandals, number one. And number two is that, look, it's dry down there. it is super, super dry. You go up, you get into the arid zone. So you get some cactus, but you transition out of that. You start getting some grasslands, some little scrubby, shrubby plants in there. Then you get a transition zone, grasslands. The cactus is basically gone, but now you're getting short trees. Go up a little bit higher. Then you get into the Scalesia zone, which is basically rainforest at that point. So now when you have a rainforest, you have immense amounts of biodiversity. It's warm and wet enough. And then you get even high enough, and that's that dark green here, just little spots kind of up at the highest points of San Cristobal Island. That's cloud forest up there. It's too cool to sustain the biodiversity up there, but it is wet enough to be able to sustain it. So you basically get 5 what we call plant zones on one island, 5 different climates that you find all over the world, usually very far from each other, on literally one island, and one road bisects the island, and that's the road where we planted all of our sensors. So here's some awesome Microsoft Paint skills. Yes, I am in charge of the computer mapping program here, but I decided to go with Microsoft Paint because, you know, you go with what you know. And no, it's basically, so if you look at it, we're like looking from the south facing north. You have the windward side of the island, the wet side of the island, or at least wetter side of the island. You have the dry side of the island, windward, leeward dynamics going on there. And what you have is the different plant zones. This is just approximated. And then where there are current weather stations, actually, if I understand correctly, this weather station is out, the one at 320 meters, at least last I heard. But anyway, with that in mind, those are the only weather stations that are on there. We stuck 10 more on there, but we put them, instead of being in idealized situations where you put a full weather station, we put them into the different plant zones and into the different habitats that the different plants and animals live in all throughout the island. So here we are using GIS, Geographic Information Systems, to basically pull out elevation, pull out the latitude, longitude data, and then also the data for the plant zones that they're in. We basically were able to get a pretty good symmetry of, on the leeward side, the dry side of the island, the wet side of the island. And then from there, where do we put our sensors, at what altitude, at what plant zone was it in, and then just where are they relative to different landmarks on here. So we're actually pretty happy with where we were able to get all of our sensors. What did we find? So this is preliminary results. We are now we've had, I think, 4 data dumps, sounds right. So basically every month we get a new, we have our people on the ground, well, we'll thank them later at the end of the talk, sending us data. And they send us a lot of data, this every minute, temperature, humidity, and dew point, and they're doing it for all 10 of our stations. So we get these large data dumps. So our first glance is, at first, when we're looking at the all-time averages, well, it kind of makes sense. If you look at it, the y-axis here is it's more humid up top, and then it's drier down at the bottom, and then it's cooler if you're to the left, and then on the x-axis to the right, it gets warmer. Well, what do we find? Cooler, wetter at our highest elevations, El Alto. We, of course, name our stations. It's very important to name your stations. El Alto, Tony, and Mora. So they're up here at the top, so cooler and wetter, but down at the bottom, we find Dolores, Zoe, Ariel, and Scarlet. We find them being drier and hotter. Now that's logical. That makes sense. These are the long-term averages, and the literature suggests we should find that. If we didn't find that, then I would be very worried about our sensors. But where do those microclimates come in? So greens are higher elevations, browns are lower elevations. In cloudy conditions or during the rainy season, we find that lapse rates drive things basically in terms of temperature. This is every minute, on the minute, all 10 of our sensors showing what happens where the lower elevation sensors are on average going to be significantly hotter than what's going on if you're up at the top of the mountain. Okay, lapse rates, that makes sense. Cooler as you go up. Here's the thing. During sunny conditions or during the dry season, which is significant there, it's about 4 or 5 months on San Cristobal Island, what do we find? Well, we find that local effects, or the things that create microclimates, completely jumble up and toss lapse rates out the window. Lapse rates don't matter anymore. In fact, actually, literally El Alto for a time, and this random day that we picked wound up being our hottest station for about an hour. And that's at the highest elevation. If we only follow lapse rates, that shouldn't happen. And yet it does. And this is what we're finding. We're finding that microclimates override lapse rates in this case. You might think this would happen in a dry climate or in other places, but on such a sharp topography, in an area, a tropical island, you wouldn't have thought that you'd seen this, and yet there it is right there. And we see it nearly every day that it is sunny on the islands, which is about 5 months out of the year. And that's where the pay dirt is. That's where the evidence matches theory. That for science, that's where we, start raising an eyebrow and be like, whoa, okay, I'm in. And that's what we're doing here. So this happens literally every single day when it's sunny. When it's cloudy, we go back to lapse rates. That's fine. That's normal. That's expected. Microclimates, it turns out, are a heck of a lot more important than maybe we're thinking about. So the temperature differences are massive. Land cover is very important. Aspect is very important. So that's the direction that you're facing. We see, especially in the extremes, we find extreme temperature differences, as much as 30 degrees Fahrenheit difference at the same minute on the island. And yet, if you only have 3 weather stations looking out there, you might have kind of warm down at the bottom and kind of cooler up at the top, but you're not, it's like looking at the world through a keyhole. You only see this much. You're not seeing the bigger picture. And it is so much more varied than we actually thought. And GIS is massive for us. Geographic Information Science, what we're able to do, this is key to the geography program, key to Earth Sciences as a department. It's just central. It's everything that we're doing. GIS has something to do with it, whether it's mapping things, just seeing them where they are, but also allowing us to do topographic analysis, land use analysis, using remote sensing, satellite imagery, aerial imagery to help confirm what it is that we're seeing. Or if we see something we don't quite understand, GIS and remote sensing allows us to further kind of like zoom in to be able to figure out why are these things different compared to what we're expecting to see. So with these preliminary results, we put them together, and eventually we got a pretty looking poster here hanging up in the GIS Center right now. And then let's kick it back to Abby, who got to have some fun with this poster.
So this was my first time ever presenting a poster at all, and definitely probably not my last, but it was one of the cooler experiences and probably my doing the damn moment, honestly. So this is me, the one of me in the t-shirt. Funny story, I had just gotten off the plane and we had to literally sprint to the symposium. We went to the wrong place initially, and then we had to take a taxi and take it to the actual place that we needed to present the poster. And we sat there for a little bit, listened to some people present their work, and then it was like, okay, it's your time. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was a little nerve-wracking at first, and I was very nervous considering that I'm surrounded by incredibly motivated scientists who are presenting their work, and they're very confident, and I wasn't as confident, but eventually I got the jitters away because I was just excited to be there and to present present something that I've been working on and be like one of them, So I was surrounded by some of the most motivated and inspiring people. And then it kind of inspired me that this is something that I want to do. I want to find research, and I want to, do something good for the world, So I was very inspired, and I hope one day to go back there and maybe have my own research one day and present it at that symposium.
So what's next? We have all this research, all this data. What is next for this project? Well, as Dr. Schultze touched on earlier, there is a ton of data to go through. Like we said, it measures humidity, dew point, temperature every minute, every day for a full year for 10 different sensors. So a ton of data to go through. I'm sure they will have a great time doing that. So what we're trying to look for is how microclimates are predicted to override lapse rates. And eventually, when we get all this together, I think we have a pretty good chance, and we're going to go for publishing this in a top-rated journal. That's the big end goal here. And it's just important to note that all of this research that we've been doing, our experiences that we had on the islands would not be here. We wouldn't have done that without GIS and remote sensing. It's an integral part of this research, and it helps us find the science of it all, the really interesting stuff. So really important tool.
So as I mentioned earlier, these sensors are located on San Cristobal Island, which is a lot different than a lot of the other islands that are there, because each island really is its own unique place. They each have something different. But we would like to expand our research to other islands, especially Santa Cruz Island. Santa Cruz is a lot drier than San Cristobal, so water is an issue there. And this study could help close the hydrologic cycle, which will tell us how much water is on the island. We're also looking for NSF grants and funding from funding with the World Bank.
So to kind of wrap up, I mean, it was just a wonderful opportunity to be able to do this, to go to what felt like the end of the earth. You know, the flight path that we took. I mean, Jade and I flew New Orleans to Miami to Bogota to Quito to Guayaquil, and then finally to San Cristobal Island. I have no idea how we made that work. Also, again, carrying a bunch of things in my backpack, the sensors that have a bunch of like wires and plastic pipings and all this other stuff that just almost, it looks sketchy as hell. I have no idea how we got through all that, but they took pliers. Why not? Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. I like those pliers. They're really, anyway. But it was an honor to be able to do this. We have to be able to thank Dr. Kimball, our chair here, who was able to help secure us some funding. Also, Lynn Chronister here at South, who was able to secure us funding. Also, we couldn't have done this simply without that. And then on top of that, we couldn't have done this without the help at the Galápagos Science Center, particularly Ariel Gila, Luis Tasipanta, and Nazaret Narvaez, who were either they helped us install the sensors or are currently kind of the stewards of the sensors out there. They go out once a month to check things. They have the same app that we do, and then send us back all of our data. We couldn't have done it without them. We couldn't have done it without the help from Universidad San Francisco de Quito. That is, I mean, just we've had so many people that have been able to do this. It's been a whole village that has been able to help us. But really, I mean, you look at this picture here, kind of wrapping up. I mean, this is Cerro Tierritas, which is the bay, well, the water in there. That's the bay that the HMS Beagle put in for the month, more or less, that Darwin was there. And you could just go snorkeling. That's where you got your water booth, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's just, you have the history, you have the biology around you. And for anybody that's ever wanted to be able to do science, but also have that kind of adventure within you, I mean, this is the place to go. And we have the means to be able to do this here at South. So kind of our last notes from the field, so go for it.
So last, but certainly not least, I would like to take a moment to just talk about the town that we stayed in, Puerto Baquerizo Moreno. It's actually one of the least populated towns among the Galapagos Islands, but this town, although small, it had so much charm and character. And of course, the first thing you do when you arrive to a foreign country is you go and eat. And to be honest, I was a little bit nervous because I am a vegetarian, so I was like, are they gonna have anything I can eat? They did. If we take a look here at this third picture, this is, it's quinoa, fried plantains, lettuce, tomato, squash, the whole kitchen sink. And I still think about this dish to this day because it was just that good. But other than the food, I mean, the town itself was so nice. I remember being able to walk around and find these little shops. I found one that had like the most tasty like ice cream pop I'd ever have, or finding a local artist who used the islands as her muse and created jewelry that I was able to bring back with me, and it's something that I will always treasure. It's like I have a little piece of the island with me and I can wear it. And on one of the last days that we were here, I borrowed a bike from our Airbnb host and just rode around town. And I mean, it's a simple bike ride, but it was very meaningful to me because I was able to just see the people there and just like, and how they're just living their lives and like seeing the nature as well, and see the sunset over Plymouth and see the nightlife emerge. I mean, so really overall, this whole experience was very meaningful to me. It's something that I'll always be grateful for, except for the last part of the trip on the last day where I accidentally drank the tap water. And if you would like to know what happened after that, no, you don't.
So my last story that I'm going to mention is the fish market that's located on Santa Cruz. It's a very small little thing, but it really goes to show you how much the sea lions really run the show there. So this is Sue. She's a very famous sea lion on the Galapagos, and that's her baby. And this is her fish market, don't be mistaken. She sits there very patiently, just waiting to be fed by the fishermen who come and they feed her pieces of fish, and her baby eats it too. Anything that gets remotely near the fish market, she will growl and bark and try to eat them. So it's really funny. Like when we were there, they were throwing the men were throwing pieces of the fish, and it was just entertaining to watch all the frigate birds come out of nowhere and try to dive bomb and get fish. And then you also had the pelicans try and eat the fish, and then she was fending them off. And then you have these guys over here who are just casually walking on a just a nice afternoon, and they see what's up and they're like, "Yo, fish, heck yeah." And they're coming up and they're trying to eat food, and then she's just like, "No, this is not for you." And it's just cool to watch and see. And I got to stand there and watch it for a little bit, and I was just mesmerized. It's like, wow, like these mammals really just run the show here, and it's just cool to see.
So for me, when I was a kid, I grew up in Miami. We have some cool stuff. We have the Everglades. The Keys are kind of cool. We have a beach. We also have a lot of shopping malls and stuff like that. So it's for me to be able to go here was just a dream. I fell in love with the place in ninth grade biology, learning about marine iguanas because I had an iguana growing up, and he didn't do much. And then I found out that there were iguanas that can swim and stay underwater for 2 hours, and they eat algae and stuff like that. I was like, oh, what do you even do? Like to anyway. But being able to go here was just so different because for me as a kid, I always wanted to see what was beyond the horizon and what was different. And that's why I've always just kind of had a bit of the travel bug. And with my students who either I bring on a study abroad to Germany, or now we're going here, try to infect my students with the travel bug, or at least to want to see what's beyond the horizon. But really for me, this was back in July. We went to a volcano, and let's just put it this way: there are no volcanoes. You probably know here in Mobile. Same thing in Miami. We're not known for our towering volcanic peaks, but to be able to go there, it felt like another planet, not even beyond the horizon. It just felt like I left planet Earth, because you're surrounded by these massive lava fields. Sierra Negra is the second largest open air crater on Earth, most recently erupting in 2018. It doesn't feel like, not just anything that I experienced that I could experience on Earth. I didn't know that, just simply put, that this could be a landscape. And just being there, it was windy that particular day. We had to basically walk through a rainforest, keep walking up, get to a cloud forest, and then kind of come down the lip of the crater. And then to just kind of get dropped into that lava field is just absolutely an incredible experience. But I didn't even feel like I was on Earth anymore. I could have been on like some Star Wars planet, Star Trek planet, or something like that. And that right there for me was realizing I hadn't just gone over the horizon. I left this planet and I was somewhere else. But we close not just with our own kind of personal notes from the field. We close with also just for geography, because that's a program here. You can major in it. I'm biased. I think everybody should major in it, but that's just me. But it's a little bit about how did we get here? How did geography wind up getting us there? How did the thing that you think is the capital of New Hampshire, how did that get me to the Galapagos Islands?
I certainly don't know the capital of New Hampshire, so for me, growing up in a small rural town, North Alabama, I wanted to get out of that. Part of the reason I came here down the south, but I didn't start out as a geography major. I actually started as a marine biology major as a freshman. And I ended up taking Dr. Mujica's like geography 114 or 115 class, and which pleasantly surprised me. And I was and it's that class that I started to be like, oh, this is something that I can do and also like at the same time, because at the time I was taking all these math and chemistry classes that I just was not feeling at the time. And I ended up absolutely loving it. So my sophomore year, I switched majors. I became a geography major, but I still kept the minor in biology. And since then, I went from really never leaving the state of Alabama to traveling to Germany for 2 weeks, presenting at a conference in Chicago, and then somehow ending up at the Galapagos Islands. So if you're someone who loves to study maybe the environment, maybe you're not the best at chemistry, and you have that sense of adventure in you, geography is definitely a really good option.
So for me, and if I can go to the Galapagos, literally anybody can go to the Galapagos. I've always loved science my entire life. It was greatly influenced by my father, Chris. I was originally, when I came to South, I was originally a meteorology major because I was pretty set that that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And when I got here, it didn't fit right. It just wasn't a good fit. And it wasn't the math that influenced that, and it wasn't anything any professor did. I didn't know. I wasn't sure if that's something I wanted to pursue for the rest of my life, because I had such a strong interest and love in not only just like the meteorological stuff, but like also the geological stuff as well, about volcanoes and earthquakes and everything else that goes with it. So I talked to my Met professor my freshman year, and I was just kind of honest. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, because the math also really did suck. I'm not gonna lie. But he's like, geography. I was like, okay, let's do it. And I took Dr. Sawyer's class and 101 and 102, and I had found my passion. I felt it in my heart. I knew this was exactly what I wanted. And I was looking forward to going to class, and I studied for fun, and it was just amazing. And I worked really, really hard, and I got noticed for all my hard work. So if you're working hard and you don't feel like you're getting noticed, somebody is watching, just so you know. So always give it your best. And it was my passion, and it's still my passion, and I can't wait to see where this field takes me, and I can't wait to grow in it. So.
And for me, I was a sophomore, terrible biochemistry student at the University of Florida. I still have stress nightmares of organic chemistry 2 exams. I remember texting my friend and asking her, so is the exam at 50 points or 100 points? That's never a good thing. You don't want to ask that question. It's 34 out of 100. Anyway, but realizing that wasn't working, I was also taking the equivalent of GEO 101, 102 physical geography at Florida's GEO 2200 physical geography. And I was loving that class. I truly enjoyed it. It was something that I had always appreciated, talking about like hurricanes and climate and earthquakes. And I just thought that was really cool. But at the same time, then it kind of was like a 1-2 punch, because the other thing was, and maybe some of you guys like this thing, kind of speaks to you too, is like, I really like nature documentaries and nature shows and stuff like that. And one that hit me sideways was Planet Earth, the original one, like from 2000, I think 6 or 7, or I don't remember what year it came out. But anyway, that was appointment viewing for like me and my roommates. But what wound up happening was I realized, number one, I'm just wasting away. I hate this biochemistry stuff. Like, I hate this is awful. Number one, but number two is like this geography stuff. It's exactly what I'm learning in class, but it's what I'm seeing on TV. And once I talked to the professor and I figured out, I can actually do things with geography. It's not just figuring out the Concord is the capital of New Hampshire. I mean, that. But besides that, that's how you could be a professor. But anyway, like, you couldn't keep me away from this, because once I learned, I just watching that show and be like, I have to go see that stuff. But also, I've always had a bit of an environmental stewardship kind of part of me. Like, I want to take care of things. I want to make sure that the world is in at least, I don't think I can say better place than when I first arrived. That might be a little too much to ask, but at least I want to make this a better place. How can I do that and go see the world? Well, the answer was geography. You couldn't keep me from there. Combine that with a study abroad program, man, I was hooked, and that was it. So for geography, for those of you who aren't majoring in it, I mean, it is a wide-ranging field, but it takes you places, and especially here. So with faculty that takes students out into the field, Dr. Sawyer, Dr. Mahinka, I mean, Dean, you got to go out to Washington, brought students to Germany. We got Dr. De Oliveira now setting up people to go down to like Brazil, into the rainforest there. We got the Galápagos here. We have many other opportunities to do this. Dr. Terbeck, you've done research over in Asia, and you'll, I'm sure get stuff also into the field. The thing is if you want to work with professors, you want to get stuff out there, go see the world. We're it. Come talk to us in one way, shape, or form, because the Galápagos, they're about 3,000 or so miles south of us, and they are this rare biological gem of a place. Yet at the same time, they're a lot more approachable, and it's a lot easier to get there than you might think. You just might have to stop in New Orleans, Miami, Bogota, Quito, Guayaquil, and San Cristobal. So I want to thank you all for coming here, listening to us talk about this. Apologies for getting started a little bit late, but thank you very much. We'll take a few questions if you like. And please, there's plenty of snacks. And if you have not done the sign-in sheet yet, please do that because we got to do that for the legal mumbo jumbo. So thank y'all so much for coming.
Okay, what are y'all expecting to see in Santa Cruz? What are y'all expecting to see? Like,
you
what
guys-
data?
Yeah, what do you guys expect to see?
I see, like, definitely an increase in temperature, that's for sure.
It's definitely a hotter island, that's for sure, but also it's much drier. So closing the hydrologic cycle is really important because they barely have enough water on that island right now for the people who live there, and population is increasing, and they're bringing more tourists on the island. That's a recipe for a problem. We'll put it that. It's already a problem, so it's not going to get better. So we really need to get on Santa Cruz with this experiment.
So you said, you measured humidity.
Yes.
Is it relative humidity?
Oh yes. Sorry. Relative
Okay.
humidity. Yes.
Sorry, I'm a meteorologist, so
That should have been clarified.
Now,
It's
does the
relative.
That's a good
sensor
point.
actually measure relative humidity at
Mm.
dew point?
I believe so.
Calculate.
The sensors are taking temperature, and then they have relative humidity, and then I believe I don't remember exactly which approximate equation that they're using, but I think they're remotely calculating dew point based off of it. Yeah, because I know you need pressure, but this doesn't have this isn't doing for pressure. But we found that they do seem to be quite reliable when we were testing like in the cryo chamber because we knew what the humidity was in there, and then calculating dew point it off. So. It's the best we can do. I put the most faith though into temperature and humidity for our calculations. Yeah.
And one other question, so you were comparing cloudy and sunny days?
Yes.
How did you determine, since you don't have solar radiation measurements, whether you?
The weather station at the airport is a long-term, I don't know, it goes back to like the 60s or something like that, and they have ground conditions for each day. So yeah, we were able to approximate sunny versus cloudy, and then again, once you get into the rainy season, you can guarantee it's going to be cloudy, and once you get into the sunny season, you can guarantee because you know how it is in the tropics, you can set your watch by it once you get into the right season. When we installed them and we were transitioning out of the we were just transitioning out of the wet season into the dry season when Abby and I were back there. It was in the dry season.
And are you gonna go back again to get the sensors back?
Yeah. Gotta go back. Oh no. Terrible.
Already going, yeah.
Done.
During the time period that sensors were out in the field, transitioning out of the La Nina
Mhm.
into a rather strong, is anticipated moderate La Nina.
Mhm.
And I know you said you wanted to publish results internally. Do you have any idea of what kind of an influence that may have on what you collect?
It is one of those timescale issues of we're swinging from one end of the pendulum to the other end of the pendulum. That's why we got to have the sensors out there. Actually, I mean, we're set for 1 year. That's the agreement with the Galápagos National Park and the Ministerio del Ambiente of the Ecuadorian government. But they've already told me you can leave it out there longer. We'll need to replace batteries. But yes, actually, if I could like wave a magic wand, I'd leave these things out here for 5 or 10 years if I could. But you're right. We're kind of like, if you're watching something happen as the shift is coming, will that slightly skew results? I think so. But at the same time, it's also giving us this unique time to see, here we go, swinging from La Nina to El Nino. What does it look like? That is a unique chance as well. It's just so it's, I didn't plan for it to be like that. It just kind of happened. So, but it'll almost be like 2 different islands. I think if we can get like a full swing from La Nina to El Nino, then back to La Nina, be out there long enough for that, that would be, I'm kind of licking my chops at the opportunity to have something like that. That'd be amazing. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you all so much. Snacks in the back. Please take a lot of them. I guess we can take the rest of them to the tailgate. That's Saturday, maybe whatever's left over. But yeah. But anyway, thank you guys so much for coming. I hope you guys have a good day.